What you know about me? Seen it all, heard it all. Oh, what you know about me? I done it all, just want it all. Oh, what you know about me? I seen it all, heard it all. Oh, what you know about me? Oh, what you know about me? Oh, what you know about me?
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. We are back. Welcome to episode 8 of More Than a Title. I'm your host, Jarrett Thomas, as usual, and we have a special episode and a guest for you today. So the whole premise of our show is More Than a Title and how to get to understand the stories behind the people that we speak with and understand the lessons in the journey. But we're going to do a different format today, and I'm really excited about it. So I met Phil, who's our special guest, Phil Johnson. We met Phil on LinkedIn, right? And he reached out and actually did a lot of research on him. And we came up with this concept about betting on yourself. And for those who aren't familiar with it, I'm actually planning a TEDx talk next year about this similar topic, right? And how do you change your mindset? So when you reached out to me, Phil, when you said that, I was like, holy moly, is this the stars aligning and all this stuff? Like, this is perfect. So I'm super happy to have you here, and can't wait to have our discussion. So, but how are you, Phil? How's everything?
I'm great, Jared. It's an honor to be on your show. I'm
Thank you,
excited
Phil.
about our conversation.
Likewise, man. Let's before we get into the bet on yourself concept. You have an amazing story, so I didn't want to steal your thunder, and I didn't want to tell it for you. But I would love if you could just give us a quick rundown about how did you get into the business space, and really what how did you get to where you are today as far as being that executive coach, and how did you change your mindset to move forward with what you're doing?
Yeah, I was born with dyslexia, and I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 5, and my parents went as far as grade 8 in school. They were
Mhm.
born around the turn of the 20th century, and it was my mother's death in December of 1967 that caused me to dramatically change the trajectory of my life. In January of 1968, I decided I wanted to do this work, um, although I really didn't know what this work was. I became an A student throughout the rest of grade school and high school, went on and got a BCom, most of an MBA, studied electrical engineering, spent 20 years in the semiconductor industry, traveling about 60,000 miles a year
Wow.
throughout North America and the Pacific Rim, and generated over $1.5 billion in revenue.
Wow.
By 1990, I had all the toys. Um, but I was surprised um, at how dysfunctional uh, people and organizations were. It surprised me because I thought the higher you went up the food chain, the better the quality of leadership you would find.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the case at all. Um, so I turned down 2 vice presidential roles and decided to leave corporate America so that I could help to lead it in a better direction. And for the last 21 years, I've been a executive coach all over the world. I've coached people running multi-billion-dollar companies with thousands of employees and Harvard MBAs and PhDs, and I've been a university faculty advisor to PhD students in organizational development and authentic leadership.
Wow.
Um, I started working when I was 9 years old, pulling copper out of the back of dumpsters and selling it for 5 cents a pound. That was my allowance.
Wow.
And so where I grew up, there were no. Uh, we had a milkman, bread man, egg man, and potato man that made their deliveries in horse-drawn trucks
Wow.
on dirt roads, and there was no. There was there were no private phone lines. We shared a phone line with our family shared a phone line with 5 other households. So
Wow.
when you would get on the phone, first of all, you'd have to make sure that nobody else was on the phone before you could use it. And then, yeah. So, anyways, it was. So I've had quite a journey, And having had the very good fortune of being born with dyslexia, and by the way, there was no such thing as dyslexia in those days, or ADD or ADHD. We
Yep.
were just labeled a slow learner. So
Yep.
I carried that label around with me for the first 35 years of my life. I'm
Wow.
68 now.
Wow.
So I've dedicated the balance of my life to helping people understand the value and importance of developing their emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
betting on themselves
Yep.
the way I bet on myself, um, to develop their emotional intelligence. The
Yeah.
development of emotional intelligence will guarantee your career and personal success. It's
So
harder than hell to do, um, but it's essential because of the tsunami of change we're facing.
yeah.
Some scientists estimated, and I'll shut up in just a second.
No, no, you're good.
Some scientists estimate that in this century we're going to experience the equivalent of 20,000 years worth of change. So
Wow.
change is increasing at an exponential rate, and we've got a 500 million year old brain that really sucks at change. There's significant both biological and sociological resistance we have to change. And that resistance we have to change is going to create increasing levels of drama, chaos, and conflict everywhere in the world.
Wow.
So the only shot we've got at dampening the effect of the accelerating rate of change we're experiencing is the development of our emotional intelligence. So that's in the last 4 months. In the last 4 months, I've been on about 50 podcasts, um, talking just like this about the value and importance, trying to help people understand the value and importance of emotional intelligence. It's not a solution to the challenges we face, it's the only solution to the challenges we face.
I couldn't agree with you more. And it's so much to unpack with what you just said, Phil. And I think that was definitely inspiring. Like, first, when you were diagnosed, there was no ADHD or none of that when you were there, right? So essentially, they say, "Hey, like this gentleman Phil just doesn't get it. He's not able to learn. He's not able to be in these scenarios. We need to give him. We need to come up with a formula or format to help him increase his learning."
No,
Oh,
they didn't. No,
oh, they
they
did it.
didn't.
Oh, they did it.
No, 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 no. Um, can I just read you a little snippet of my life story?
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Hang on, this might help put in. Let me um, let me help put this in perspective.
Okay.
Bear with me.
No, all good.
Sing for a minute.
I can't sing and I'm stuffy now, Phil. I wish I was sounding better. I feel like I've got
All
a
right, here we go. Here we go. I entitled this "Why I Created the MBL, the Master of Business Leadership Program."
okay.
I was born in Brantford, Ontario, Canada, on December 1st, 1953. Our family lived in a small two-bedroom post-World War II bungalow where my mom and dad raised three boys. I was the youngest, and quite a surprise, as my mother was in her early 40s when I was born. Three boys in one small bedroom and a coal-burning furnace with no air conditioning. My parents were born in 1909 and 1910 and went as far as grade 8 in school. My father was a factory worker who never made more than $5 per hour. During World War II, he served as a sergeant in a mortar artillery platoon in North Africa. His men used to call him the old man because he was 29 years old when he enlisted. As a younger man, he had boxed and played semi pro baseball. My dad made his own beer, and I helped by putting the caps on the bottles.
Yeah.
My mother was a factory seamstress who left her job to take care of our family. I was born 6 weeks prematurely and weighed approximately 4 pounds. My first 6 months were spent in an incubator at the local Brantford General Hospital. My
Wow.
dad brought milk to me each day on his bicycle because he didn't own a car. I have dyslexia. It's a neurological disorder that I was born with. I notice it most when I'm trying to spell, read, and occasionally hear. It can cause me to rearrange words and numbers in my mind. I didn't realize I had the condition until about 35 years ago. Back in those days, there was no such thing as dyslexia, ADD, or ADHD. I failed grade 3 and grade 5 and was labeled a slow learner. And I used to pray the teacher would never ask me a question, and I rarely made eye contact. Many times the back of my shirt would be soaked with sweat by the time class was over. Getting a C was a great mark for me.
Mhm.
A's and B's were out of the question. Some of my earliest childhood memories were that our neighborhood had dirt roads. Asphalt roads, TVs, and private phone lines came several years later. We also had a milkman, bread man, egg man, and potato man that made their deliveries in horse-drawn trucks. I started working when I was 9 years old, pulling copper wire out of the back of factory dumpsters and selling it for 5 cents a pound. That was my allowance. By the time I was 12, I had a part-time job working in a produce factory loading boxcars. I also worked as a caddy at a local golf course. I had money, life was good. A few years later, my mother developed breast cancer. She underwent radiation and chemotherapy, which led to a radical mastectomy. On
Wow.
December 3rd, 1967, she died. It was 2 days after my 14th birthday. I was in grade 7 at the time.
Wow.
1 month later, I made a decision that was to change the trajectory of my life. It was a snowy January night around midnight, and I was taking my dog Duke for a walk. He was a blue tick hound my parents had given me as a puppy when I was 5 years old. Standing behind a local factory, I decided to go for it. I was going to see what was on the other side of the hill and come back and help my friends that had already given up on life. That decision began a 54-year journey that continues today. I became an A student throughout the rest of grade school and high school. My dad died in May of 1974 as I was completing grade 13. 4
Wow.
years later, I graduated in the top of my class from the DeGroote School of Business at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. I
Wow.
also played football and basketball. Later, I spent 5 years studying electrical engineering while beginning what turned out to be a 20-year career in the semiconductor industry. By the
Wow.
time my career in that industry had ended, I had become a corporate executive. I was traveling over 60,000 miles per year throughout America and the Pacific Rim. In 1990, I remember talking with one of my older brothers and commenting, "Is this all there is?" I had accomplished more than I, or for that matter, anyone else ever thought I would. In the process, I had become mindlessly focused on the drive to acquire and achieve conventional wealth and success. But obtaining the brass ring wasn't as fulfilling as I dreamt it would be. Along the way, I had forgotten the promise I'd made to myself on that snowy January night in 1968. I eventually decided to leave corporate America, breaking away from the herd in order to lead it in a better direction. A short time later, I turned down 2 vice presidential roles so that I could begin the creation of what has become the Master of Business Leadership program. For the past 21 years, I've been an executive coach assisting executives and organizations to bet on themselves by developing their emotional intelligence.
Wow.
There are MBL alumni currently living in the United States, Canada, UK, Europe, Japan, Germany, Bosnia, Africa, Australia, the Middle East, and Saudi Arabia. So
Wow.
there you go. That's
Wow. First of all, that's an amazing story, Phil.
I know.
And I'm gonna tell you one thing that resonates with me, right?
Sure.
So when you said you was with your dog and you went over the hill and you made the decision that, hey, I'm gonna change my life, right? And I'm gonna change the people's life around me, right? But the only way I can do it if I get over this hill. And the reason why I resonate with that, I'm from the Bronx, right? So I'm 33 years old. I have both my parents still here. But my high school, just my where I'm from was a tumultuous period, right? Just where I'm from, just my neighborhood alone. And that's why I want to have the bet on yourself talk, because I feel like I did the same thing. Instead of me going over the hill, it was me going into tech, right? So, I was in the streets, I was doing a bunch of stupid stuff. And then when my son was born, that was the moment for me. So when I saw my son's eyes, it was like, this shit has to stop. You know what I mean?
What am I doing? Yeah.
Yeah, what am I doing here? And that's how I got into tech sales. So I'm curious, my real question is, do you think everybody has that in them to say, hey, let me change my mindset? Because I'm always curious to know what made me turn right versus one of my friends who may have been in a similar scenario and made them turn left.
I know exactly. I know exactly what made you turn right and your friends turn left.
Okay.
And this is going to resonate with you when I tell you.
Okay.
Um, you developed an emotional connection with a vision of a desired result that was more important to you than your fear of leaving your comfort zone to go get it.
Wow.
And see, there's so much we need to talk about. Uh,
That was real. That was deep, man. That was great.
that's that's if you like that, get ready for what's coming
All right.
because I'm going to tell you the root cause of all drama, chaos, and conflict everywhere in the world.
Okay.
And I'm going to tell you the solution to all drama, chaos, and conflict everywhere in the world. And it involves energy physics.
Okay.
And I've been proving what I'm about to tell you everywhere in the world for the last 21 years.
Okay.
But before I tell you what that is, I'm going to tell you why I'm going to explain the three major sources of resistance we have to change.
Okay.
Two are biological and one sociological. So here goes. The first biological one is that we have a part of our brain called the amygdala that for the last 500 million years has been trying to keep us safe and alive by making sure we never leave the comfort of our cave, the safety of our cave. And if we do, if we take an action that moves us outside of our comfort zone, that triggers our amygdala to secrete a hormone into our bloodstream called cortisol. And that causes the executive center of our brain, our prefrontal cortex, to shut off. And we go into what psychologists refer to as an amygdala hijack. We go into fight, flight, or freeze mode. Some people lash out, some people run away, some people freeze like a deer in the headlights. And when that happens in conflict situations, people die. And when it happens in business or personal situations, relationships die. We burn trust. So if you think, as an analogy, if you think of your amygdala as a very frightened 4-year-old child, the development of our emotional intelligence acts like a big brother or a big sister to quiet the amygdala response down and better enable us to feel the fear and anxiety that change and innovation always creates in us and move through it towards the vision of our desired results. And that's what I call emotional labor. So
Wow.
that's number one. Number two,
Wow.
the second biological source of resistance we have to change is our existing habits. We can develop habits at any age. It's called brain. The actions we take create the neural network pathways in our brain that become our habits, and we can do that at any age. It's called brain plasticity or neurogenesis. But even though we can develop new habits at any age that are better than our old habits, they're always going to be weaker than our old habits, and there's going to be an ongoing battle for control between our old habits and our new habits. So that's the second source of resistance we have to change. The third is sociological, meaning the people around us don't want us to change. Because if we change and start to get better results, maybe they're going to have to change, and that scares the hell out of them.
Yeah.
And the best way to ensure they don't have to change is to make sure we fail. So they can say, see, I told you, now shut up, get your head down, and come back into the herd like the rest of us.
Yeah.
And most of this is going on unconsciously, but it's going on within everybody, everywhere, all the time, 24/7. So
That's right.
those are the three sources we have of resistance to doing what I guarantee on my life will create personal and career success for anybody.
Wow.
So
So
go
that's
ahead.
no, no. I would say that I learned so much just now from that, like, and it resonates, and everything you said just makes so much
Sure,
sense, right?
sure it does.
Do
I'm
you,
just helping you connect the dots.
no, for sure, and it's eye opening for me, and that's why I'm curious. Do you think there's the people that went left, right? So,
Yeah,
do you think there was a specific block in that moment, and how does one remove that block, right? Because they might have had
I'm just
children.
about just about to tell you.
Oh, perfect, perfect.
Okay, so how did that blocks get put in? How did those blocks get put into place?
Yeah.
Those blocks are called resistance, judgment, and attachment to outcome. They're called our walls. So here goes. Now this is really important for your listeners because it's the key to everything. Um, Sounds really dramatic, doesn't it?
Yeah,
But
I'm like,
hey,
you got a cliffhanger. I'm
yeah,
like,
when we're born, we're not born with a we're not born with a conscious mind. See, we're only conscious, all of us, about 3 to 5% of the time. The rest of the time, we're relying on our unconscious habits to create our behaviors and our results, which is okay. Because if we had to rely on our conscious mind to survive, we'd be dead instantly. So the real powerhouse in us is our unconscious mind. So we're not born with a conscious mind. Our conscious mind doesn't kick in until we're about a year or so old. But we immediately start wiring up our brain, creating the neural network pathways that become our habits. And those habits are what I call victim habits. They're habits that cause us to unconsciously give away our energy. And we do it in a myriad of ways: how we communicate, listen, take responsibility, make decisions, all sorts of ways. But when we give away our energy, it creates an energy deficit in us. Equals MC squared. Energy can't be created or destroyed. It just changes form. So when we're giving away our energy over here unconsciously, we have to replace that energy by simultaneously trying to steal energy from other people over here.
Wow.
And that dynamic is going on inside of everybody, everywhere, all the time. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's the cause of all the drama, chaos, and conflict in the world. Um, it, that process causes our walls to go up. We become more resistive, more judgmental, more attached to outcome. So what I do in the Master of Business Leadership program is I show people how they're unconsciously giving away their energy, and I give them better habits to practice to stop doing that. And when they stop giving away their energy over here, their need to steal the energy of other people over here goes away. And in that process, because they don't need it, and in that process, that's how you develop your emotional intelligence. You raise your level of consciousness about what's going on in you and around you, and you become a more inspirational leader. Okay.
That's
Um,
amazing. That's
it
amazing.
is,
That
and
really,
it works. It works 100% of the time with anybody in the world at any age doing anything, provided they're willing to do the work of developing these habits that lower their walls. And the reality is, see, our educational system has failed us
for sure.
dramatically,
For
and
sure.
our employment system has failed us dramatically because they've done nothing to prepare us for the tsunami of change we face.
Yeah.
We're completely, totally, absolutely unprepared for what we face. And the only shot we've got of surviving this century as a species is the development of our emotional intelligence. See, we're the virus on the planet. There isn't another species living on the planet that wouldn't be better off if we didn't exist. We are single handedly destroying the planet and destroying ourselves because of ego based fear.
Wow.
We killed more people in the 20th century than all of recorded human history. And that trend is continuing in this century.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
all of that toxicity, all of that drama, chaos, and conflict is a direct result of what happens when we raise our walls and give away our energy. The solution to all of it is to bet on yourself by developing the habits that stop you from giving away your energy. You want an example?
Yeah, we love one. Absolutely.
This is one of the NBL habits called authentic listening. So, the key to authentic listening is not to take anything personally. How somebody feels about you has nothing to do with you. It has to do with what's going on inside of them. Whether they like you or whether they hate you has nothing to do with you. But if how you feel about yourself is based on how somebody feels about you, who's running your life, you or them?
Them all day.
So if they like you, you like you. If they don't like you, you don't like you. So you're unconsciously giving away your energy to everybody else to determine how you should feel about yourself. How crazy is that?
That's insane.
but we
And
do it on social media 24/7.
that's exactly
We're begging people to like us so that we can like us.
that is so true, right? And then like
We're
mhm,
giving away our energy left and right just in that one interest, at one instance, and it causes us to become more resistive, more judgmental, and more attached to outcome. Boy, I
that
sure
is
hope this podcast gets a good rating. I
no,
sure hope
this
people
is
follow.
no, you're giving the game, and I'm so intrigued by this, right? And like for me to understand, like, how does someone, right, especially coming from my situation or my scenario, right? So when I tell people you got to bet on yourself, it seems like such a vague concept, right? It's like, okay, you bet on yourself, but what does that mean, right? What if somebody I know about putting the work, but what if somebody says, "Look, what is step one to betting on yourself?" Right? Like, how do I do that?
You're an example. I'm an example of betting on yourself.
For sure.
You bet on yourself. Your son or daughter was born?
Yeah, it was my son. So he's 13 now, and
When your son was born,
uh-huh.
you said, "Holy shit, this is real.
Yeah,
I just created a life."
yeah,
Um, and you made a commitment to creating a better life.
for sure.
And that emotional connection you had to that desired result created the fuel, the motivation for you to move outside of your comfort zone and do the emotional labor that requires. Your desire for a better result was stronger than the fear that got generated in you when you left your comfort zone. And by doing that emotional labor, it started to teach you things about yourself and other people. And
Uh,
by the way, that's why you succeed in sales.
For sure. Yep.
Okay. It's because of that emotional labor you were doing. I'll give you another example of a company that's doing the same thing that's
Uh-huh.
generating over $1 trillion a year in sales. Remind me, I'll do that later.
I was gonna say I'm ready for it now. You got me excited.
Too bad. Um, but See, because we've grown up in herds, because we've evolved from, society, social groups, um, it's important. It was important for us to be able to determine, to sense who's trying to help us and who's trying to eat us, right?
Yeah, so true.
So we develop these specialized brain cells in our prefrontal cortex that brain scientists call mirror neurons. I call them bullshit meters. That's why you can walk into a room and feel the energy in the room.
Yeah, so
You can
true.
have a conversation with somebody and feel whether they're being real or not.
Yeah,
Okay. That's your mirror neurons. You can sense the energy. You can sense whether the person has their walls up or their walls down.
yeah,
You can sense whether the person is being resistive, judgmental, and attached to outcome or not. So the development of your emotional intelligence enabled you to be a little more comfortable in your own skin. It enabled you to lower your walls so that when you're serving somebody, they get a sense that you're not trying to hurt them, you're trying to help them.
that's so true.
So you're building trust.
For
You're
sure.
demonstrating trustability by lowering your walls.
That's amazing. It's amazing to actually put the actual words behind because I think we all feel that. We all know what it is. You know, you go in a room and you just know this is places for you, or even
Mirror neurons.
yeah, mirror neurons, right? And even intuition, right? If you feel like something bad is about to happen, and then you
Mirror
then you
neurons.
yeah. So that's amazing that we have that, right? And what made you want to get into this and understand this more deeper? Like aside from jumping over the hill and like wanting to better yourself, but what made you want to actually get into the science of it?
Um, I wanted my life to have meaning. I wanted to make a contribution to everybody, as many people as I could. I know my life is finite. Our lives are all finite.
Yeah,
Um, so what the hell? I mean, it's my being better off doesn't work unless you're better off too. Um, and it's a lot more fun when we get to play together, when we trust each other. Um, and I want to have as much fun as I can have.
It's a great answer. I think we all do it. I think just getting to that place, because it seems like you're at a place where you have freedom, so to speak, right? Where you can say what you want, do what you want, go where you want to do, and you've accomplished a lot and seen a lot of things that a lot of people wouldn't, right? And I think that's the premise of everybody and what the goal is. I think that's the American dream, right? The
Yep.
real American dream,
Yep.
right? How does one how does one really get there and identify, like, even though these bad habits, like, can somebody at 56 years old with these bad habits, is all about the emotional connection and what the outcomes you want? Is that what we tie it into? Like, what if you don't get that?
Let me give you an example of the journey. Let me give you an example of comparing IQ with EQ.
Okay.
So let's think of IQ as somebody giving you $10,000 a day for 31 days.
Okay.
So at the end of 31 days, you've got $310,000.
Yeah.
And let's think of the development of your emotional intelligence as getting a penny that doubles in value every day for 31 days. So
Yeah.
day one, you've got a penny. Day two, you've got 2 pennies. Day
Yeah.
three, you've got 4 pennies.
Yeah.
Day 31, you've got $10.7 million. The point is that it doesn't take any more effort to go from day 30 to day 31 than it did to go from day 1 to day 2, but it's a journey.
Yeah.
It's a never-ending journey. And by the way, day 40 is over 5 billion, day 50 is over 5 trillion.
Wow.
So the development of our emotional intelligence will have a massive, a remarkable effect on your results, far greater than IQ. See, IQ is largely genetic. If you've got 160 IQ, your parents had a high IQ, they had a high IQ, and you inherited those genes.
Yeah.
But the development of emotional intelligence is something that anybody can do by
Yeah.
doing the emotional labor, the kind of emotional labor that you've been doing,
Yeah.
that I've been doing.
Yeah.
Anybody can develop their emotional intelligence. And because of the accelerating rate of global change, it is essential we do. The development of our emotional intelligence will guarantee our success, both career and professional. Imagine another analogy.
Yeah.
Imagine you were able to buy Apple stock when it first came on the market.
Oh, no brainer.
How much would you spend?
Whew, right now, everything I have on it.
Would,
I'll
would
go
you would you borrow? Of
no,
course you would.
I wouldn't want to. I would
You'd
want.
get every nickel you could. Every $1,000 you spend on Apple stock might be worth several million or tens of millions today.
Yeah, true.
So it's a sure thing.
Yeah,
And you'd be in on the ground floor.
yeah,
That's what I'm saying about emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is going to become a multi-trillion-dollar industry because it is an essential piece of our development that every person on the planet is missing. And because of the tsunami of change we're facing, it's going to drive people in this direction because it's the only solution to be able to reduce the drama, chaos, and conflict that changes. We're all being ripped out of our comfort zones
yeah,
at an accelerating rate.
yeah. COVID being a big example.
Yeah, COVID was a gift
Yep.
because it shows us how bad we suck at change. What's coming down the road is going to make COVID look like nothing. How
Yeah.
about climate change?
Yeah.
How
Exactly.
about CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing technology? How about AI? How about other pandemics?
Yeah.
Mark Twain once said, if the only way mankind can learn is through experience, I see no hope for mankind. Meaning, if the only way we can learn is by putting our hand on the stove, that assumes that we're going to be around to learn from it.
Yeah,
And a lot of these things that we're facing, we don't get a do-over.
for sure.
We've we've got to develop the wisdom, the emotional intelligence, to not put our hand on the stove in the first place.
Yeah,
And we are a long way away from, away from having that wisdom, away from having that emotional intelligence. So quite frankly, it doesn't look good for us. I'm glad I'm my age and not your age. I
I,
don't mean that. I
no,
don't mean
it's
I don't mean to
that's
be
rich,
mean
right?
about that.
No, that is frightening. I think about these things for my kids, right? My
Yeah,
4-year-old,
oh Jesus. You
like,
know,
holy,
there are kids in grade school committing suicide
yeah, for sure.
because they're scared to death of the world that they're moving into, and they don't even have a vote.
Yeah,
They don't even have a vote.
you're right. Absolutely right.
So it's up to us. We have to start to change our trajectory by developing our emotional intelligence. If they have a shot, we have to stand up and do the very difficult emotional labor that the development of our emotional intelligence requires.
Yeah,
And it's not easy. I sure as hell wouldn't have done it if I hadn't been born with dyslexia. Guaranteed. See,
amazing.
the development of emotional intelligence is like Navy SEAL training for your emotions. It's like nobody would ever go to a dentist unless they were either in pain or trying to avoid pain.
Yeah,
So there's only two sources of motivation that will cause us to leave our comfort zone. One is pain, the other one is passion or love. And hardly anybody's connected to their passion. So, for the most part, the small percentage of people that are willing to leave their comfort zone and do the emotional labor that their emotional intelligence requires are driven by fear. They're driven by pain.
for
They're
sure.
driven by an urgent desire for better results than they're currently getting.
So true. Well, my last question to you, Phil, because I could talk about this all day. Like, this is so interesting to me, and I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom. Right? What advice would you give to me to scale this out for people back in my neighborhood? Because like that's my mission statement. The reason why I stepped off and wanted to do LinkedIn and be on the scene, tell my story, share my
Be an
experience.
example of the behavior, be an example of emotionally intelligent, be an example not through your words, through your actions.
Okay.
See, if you need a title to get people to follow you, you're not a leader. If your actions don't inspire people to follow you, you're not a leader.
There you go.
And here's another little piece of information. Because of our biology, we tend to burn trust 5 to 7 times faster than we can earn trust. What that means is that if your walls are up just 15% of the time, if you're giving away your energy just 15% of the time, if you're being resistive, judgmental, or attached to outcome just 15% of the time, you're actually burning trust, not earning trust.
Wow. That's insane. That's so rare. That was a mic drop moment. I wish I had my sound effects, and I wish I wasn't so stuffy
Oh,
right now.
let me finish off by telling you who the company is.
Okay.
Let me tell you who the company is whose sole primary focus on hiring is they're looking for emotional intelligence.
Yeah. Which
That,
one?
that
Should I take a
company
guess?
that company is Apple.
Okay. I was
That's
gonna guess.
that's why when you walk into an Apple store, that energy you feel is an example of a more emotionally intelligent environment. They're not trying to sell you anything. They're trying to understand your pain and, if possible, help you with your pain. Whether or not you buy anything is secondary to their desire to want to serve you. They want you to have a great experience. And maybe you'll go tell your friends, and maybe they'll tell their friends. And so that energy, notice the energy within the Apple store is much lighter than the energy of the stores surrounding the Apple store.
So
So the
true.
development of our emotional intelligence represents the future of organizational development. Apple, Google, Southwest Airlines, JetBlue, Infosys, Whole Foods, FedEx, Costco, and others, more and more are hiring, promoting, and developing emotional intelligence.
That's it's crazy. And now that you mention it, you're absolutely right, right? And that should be the model, because what you said, like the experience, everything, whether it's online, whether it's offline, whether it's brick and mortar, everything is experience and selling into that pain, right? And that's the beauty of marketing and all that good stuff. But this is an amazing conversation, Phil. And I definitely want to thank you for taking time to come here. For everyone listening, this is me and Phil's first conversation, and it is a hell of a one. And I'm intrigued. I would love a part two. I would love to just learn more about this concept and learn more about you, sir. But just want to thank you for taking time out your day. It was an absolute pleasure. I'm sure the listeners, our minds are blown, and we're thinking about how we can better on ourselves. So for all those people out there, it's all a mindset. It's all a mindset, and it's all about the emotional intelligence as well. And how do you tie that back to your outcomes and your actions, right? Because it's one thing to say it. It's another to do.
Yeah. And so I want to leave your listeners with this. The one thing I'd like them to take away from this is that the development of their emotional intelligence will guarantee that the rest of their life is the best of their life. It will guarantee their success. It will guarantee not only on a career level, but also on a personal level. That's how you bet on yourself. You bet on yourself by developing your emotional intelligence.
That's it. And guys, and for those listening, Phil is living proof. Myself, I'm living proof, right? I could have went a lot of different scenarios. I could have easily went left, right? But it was that one thing that I was passionate about. That emotional connection for me was family, right? And then when it comes to working, my passion was how do I show other people who look like me, dress like me, that it's okay for you to be you in tech? Like one thing that I said in the last podcast is like, how can I tell my kids they can be whatever they want to be if I'm afraid to be myself in tech?
You don't tell them, you show them.
You show them. Exactly. And that's
the difference between intellect. That's the difference between, I didn't mention this. The difference between intellectual intelligence and emotional intelligence is emotional intelligence is an experiential process. It's not an intellectual process. So you can't develop your emotional intelligence by having a conversation like this,
yep,
or reading a book or watching a video. The only way you develop your emotional intelligence, those are intellectual processes. The way that you develop your emotional intelligence is based on what you do, not what you think. Actually, what you do will change what you think.
That's a great mic dropper right there, man. You shared so many different gems, Phil. Like
Phil Johnson out.
Yeah, right. But thank you again, Phil. It was an absolute pleasure. If you guys want to connect with Phil, go on LinkedIn. He's at Phil Johnson. The course is MBL, as you see in the background. He's a great guy, as you guys can see. Please, you ping him. Make sure you follow him, share his content. I know I will be. And Phil, it was an absolute pleasure, brother. I would love to keep in touch with you. And
I love that, Jarrett. Thank you.
Thanks you again, brother.
Thanks for the work you're doing.
No, thank you, man. Thank you. And it's an honor, man. So thank you guys for showing up for another episode of More Than a Title. This was amazing. And I'm on cloud nine now. And I'm like, holy crap. But I'll see you guys next week. Actually, we have a bonus episode tomorrow with Arjan, who's the CEO of Hello Woofy. So tune in tomorrow, same time. And Phil, thank you again. And we'll see you guys for next episode of More Than a Title.
What you know about me? Seen it all, heard it all. Oh, what you know about me?